Or good morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Scio Township Planning Commission meeting for March 10th, 2025. And with that, roll call, please.
Roll call the commissioners. Brandt.
Here.
Walsh. Here. Moore.
Here.
Hyde. Here. Fletcher.
Present.
Hindle.
Here.
Culbertson.
Here. All right, adoption of the agenda. Are there any revisions or additions to our posted agenda? Seeing none.
I'll move to adopt the agenda, please.
Moved by Brandt.
Second.
Support by Moore. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, agenda is as posted. Communications and correspondence. We did get an email report from Commissioner Hyde today on the Huron River Watershed Council. Any other communications? All right, then we'll welcome our guests from the city of Ann Arbor. Michelle. Welcome, Michelle.
Good evening, all. Can you hear me okay?
Just
Yes.
fine.
Okay, excellent. Well, then hopefully I have permission to share my screen. So I have a short presentation for you this evening. Let me go ahead and pull that up.
And I want to say, Michelle, thank you so much. I think this is, well, since I've been on the planning commission since 2018, it's the first time we've really had this kind of outreach from the city. So sincerely appreciate it.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be here. I'm actually a Scio Township resident, and I'm new to the planning team at the city. You'd think I would be perfect at this after 5 years of sharing our screens on Zoom, but I'm not. I'm still looking for.
Keep changing where things are.
Yeah, if you move your.
Here, let me try this. So I have this is the agenda.
It's coming up.
Okay, and I have this. Okay.
Okay,
That
so
should work.
that's the agenda, right? And then you're gonna, okay, perfect, okay.
Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and put this on full screen, and then I will get started. Yeah, I want to thank you for your time this evening. We at the city are in the middle of, I suppose you could say, of our comprehensive planning rewrite. It is actually currently with our consultants being drafted. So I don't have a draft yet to share, but I did want to come introduce myself and let you know where we're at so that when we do have a draft, we will send it over and really open this line of communication for us to discuss land use since we do share a border. So I'm going to start this evening from the very beginning of this process, and I'm happy to take any clarifying questions as we go, and then we can have some discussion at the end if you'd like. So my name is Michelle Bennett. I'm a senior planner at the city of Ann Arbor. My boss, the planning manager, Brett Leonard, should be a participant who may need to be promoted as panelist if you see him there. I will be giving the presentation, but he's been at the city much longer than I have and been leading this process, so he will help me with any questions if you all have any.
Is Brett there? Not yet, not yet, okay.
Okay, yeah, he may not have realized that we were starting right at 7 with the presentation, but he does know to be here tonight.
We move things along.
That's okay. No, it's an honor to be at the top of an agenda and not have to wait hours. So I'll start with the beginning here. And this came from our city council at the start of our process. They already had in mind some major components of the plan that they wanted to see implemented. So our first thing is to align with our carbon neutrality plan that the city adopted, I believe, in 2020. And so they have asked us, rightfully so, to make sure that our recommendations are in no way, jeopardizing those goals, that we align and complement each other. Secondly, they've asked for us to densify our single-family zones. They are very aware of the housing crisis that we're in and feel strongly this is one way that we can tackle that. They've also asked for fewer zoning districts. I believe at the moment we have over 34, and that's a bit cumbersome, even for our staff to keep track of, but certainly for developers coming in or even residents who might want to try to read through our Unified Development Code. They've asked that we emphasize values over land use, which means that when we do come into tough decisions, that we do rely on affordability, sustainability, and equity as our kind of guiding principles. And then also that this plan is restorative. It's asking us specifically to seek to repair past land use policies and regulations that have resulted in the exclusion of people on race and income and other inequities. So this was our starting point here. And sort of how we drafted our RFP for our comprehensive plan and what's been guiding us as we go. I did want to add that during our engagement process with the community, we added a fourth value, which is to be dynamic. This is to get at the residents' concerns about which one of these values captures us being place-based, having kind of more place-based, place-making strategies, what encapsulates us being a vibrant, thriving city that's always changing. And so the word we've come up with for that is dynamic. So I'm going to briefly touch on some of our public outreach, and then I'm going to get really into our land use goals here as well. So here's sort of our engagement by the numbers. We started this process in the summer of 2023. So for the first year at least, we were out in the community, going to events. We hosted a survey. We have a website where we post our updates. There's been a series of focus groups and interviews. We're really trying to reach as many people in the community as possible, and their input is helping to inform the direction that we go. These were large, some of these events were held at our public library. We did a series of these in the spring and in the fall, and thankfully had hundreds of people attend. Here's some of the activities that we did. And to be clear, because of our guidance from council has been very focused on development and densification, that's where we started. We didn't ask people, do you want to see more development or not? We said, if and when there is new development, what are some of these priority areas for you? And so this was our matrix that we presented to them. The main takeaway here is that over and over again, we heard at the very top that more housing and an increase in affordable housing is a priority, and that people are comfortable with certain levels of density, which is quite a departure from what we've heard, if you've been in the planning profession for long enough, is a departure from what we've heard before. So we are happy to see that there is some alignment. Not every neighborhood agrees with this, but there is some alignment here in council and residents' priorities. And then here are some of the other areas that we're exploring. You can see here we presented 6 other ideas with a gradient of to what level do you agree with this. So if there is a cluster of stickers towards the agree section, right, that's how we sort of indicate consensus. And then we broke this down into very strong agreement, or moderate to low. And so at least at these events that we held, there was pretty strong agreement with developing our transit corridors, some of which cross over into Scio Township, adding density to near North Campus, what to do with our shopping centers that we have, which we hope to redevelop. And then strong agreement as well with expanding our downtown and our low-rise residential districts, which also call for densification, like I mentioned earlier. We also did some engagement with focus groups. So these were professionals in the field to run past them. Is there alignment not only with our council, planning commission, and residents, but also people that are in this field? So this slide is just to show you kind of some of the bigger takeaways on these topics that align with the different values that we had already set forth. I'm happy to send these slides out after as well. So let's get into land use. I don't probably need to go over this too much with the planning commission, but we do like to share with our residents that a future land use map is not the same as zoning. They are very connected though, and that our future land use, which I'll be showing you, is aspirational. They are land use categories. They are not zones, although they are sort of a precedent for what zones will likely become, or at least the direction that we're going in. But that zoning is what really has the legal weight behind it, and that is a separate process coming afterwards. So these are some of our future land use goals and strategies. This is kind of our more actionable breakdown of what council had, the resolution that I had showed you at the beginning of this presentation is really creating more flexibility in our residential districts. And that leads into number 2, which is denser multifamily housing that is allowed by right, expanding those options. That helps to create more walkable, connected neighborhoods so that people can get to their basic needs by other ways than cars. That we are focusing our land use around our transit service that we have, supporting denser, more compact development as a way to spare ourselves from, negatively impacting our natural features. And then thinking about our tax base and our regional economy and what we can do to diversify the economy through land use. So here is a picture of our future land use map. I did take a look before this meeting around where we border the township. I did not see any conflicts there between, say, for example, right across the street from each other, we had a zone and you had a zone that might conflict. I did not see that, but I think when we have the draft out and we send it to you, I would ask you all to take a look as well and see if you think if there's anything that could be a potential conflict land use wise. But like I had said at the beginning, where we're trying to streamline our zones, you can see here that we, in this future land use, have gotten down to 4. Those top 4 there are really land use based. The bottom 3 you can see are parks or schools or public properties that we wouldn't really be zoning for. So it's quite a streamlining, it's quite a reduction. As our future land use map, this is probably not where our zoning categories will end up exactly, but it is meant to show that we are serious about, streamlining our zoning districts. So I'm going to walk.
Flex mean?
Yeah, I'm going to go through these 4 categories, and then I'm happy to take any questions as we go through those. So here's a main overview of them. Our low-rise residential, that's the only residential category that we have now. And even in that one, we are allowing some commercial use. But that's, I'll get more into that, but that's our lower scale housing. It's really our only housing district, and it's meant to include more missing middle housing into our neighborhoods. Our mixed use is primarily along our corridors where we're trying to increase density along our transit routes. So we've looked at the rides bus lines and where they've planned to be in 2045. And so we're aligning there. Our mixed use hubs are going to be our densest, our tallest, I guess our most mixed use, if that makes sense, hubs. So these will be, if we go back on the map, you can see this is our downtown. It's also near Briarwood. And then what's closest to you all would be the center right over here, like on Maple and Miller, Maple and Liberty, all of those kind of retail centers along there. And then out along Plymouth and then in Arborland. Those are kind of our shopping centers I had mentioned earlier that we were considering how to redevelop. And then lastly is our flex district. This is primarily along South Industrial. It's our most flexible in that it allows residential, commercial, and industrial uses. And in Ann Arbor, they're primarily light industrial. We don't have super intense industrial uses, but those uses are already there. We're just going to start allowing housing next to them. So here's some images. I'll go through these 4 zones, or sorry, land use categories pretty quickly, and then open it up for questions. But our low-rise residential, that's covering most of our R1 and R2 zones now. The biggest difference is it's going to allow these kinds of uses. Well, this is what's proposed at least. You can see the images of what we're looking for here. So like, this is a quadplex, it's 4 units. It's still sort of at least has the shape of a single family home. Here's a single family home with maybe an ADU behind it. We have a row of townhouses. And then what we're also going to allow in these residential categories is some neighborhood commercial. If you're familiar with this along Miller, maybe when you're driving in or out of the city, these like neighborhood kind of serving your daily needs with goods and services that aren't too impactful, negatively impactful in a residential area. So those are the main bullet points here of the changes we expect to see in our neighborhoods. The mixed use transition, like I mentioned, is primarily along our corridors. So these will have slightly higher heights, slightly more dense, and then they would allow for mixed uses. I think the ideal pattern would be, you know, commercial on the bottom, maybe residential on top. So these are some images of things that have already been built. These are mainly residential, but you can see just the scale that they're slightly taller and more units. Then our mixed use hub, so think of like a downtown like setting. This is what we're applying to some of those shopping centers in a hope to kind of encourage a more suburban development into a more urban type development. There's been a lot of discussion about this. It's going to be a very challenging and long transition. I don't think this will come overnight, but it is meant to give a little bit more flexibility as well in these shopping areas. And then this is the flex, like I said, on South Industrial and our research park. Here's some examples of kind of the type of industrial uses I was mentioning. They're very light in nature, but they might need a little bit more space. But they could still be good neighbors in that they might not be too terribly loud and they're not, you know, emitting any sort of noxious gases or things that would originally, right, when zoning started, we would have tried to segregate these uses. We're now calling for sort of a blending along this corridor as well of residential, commercial, and industrial. Do you still have a question about the flex district? I'd be happy to answer it now.
No, I don't. I think I get it.
Okay. So those are the major land uses that we've been discussing. And so I wanted to let you know where we are in the process. We have gone through about a year and a half of collecting data, of being out in the community and hearing what our residents think, going to planning commissions with these ideas. And now we're drafting the plan, which we will hope to have at the end of this month. And then it will probably go public this spring, so that we'll be happy to send you a draft of it so you have a little bit more time to think about things or write to us with any questions or thoughts. That will be available all over the spring and summer. So this will not go into the adoption phase until the fall of 2025, where we have to have it open for the 63-day review period. That would take us all the way till November of 2025. So there's still ample time for us to have any conversations about this plan if you're all interested in doing so. This is just our first point of contact here. And so, yeah, like I said, we're drafting the plan. We will refine the plan once we receive it this spring and summer, and then we will enter our official public review process this fall and go to adoption at the end of 2025. So I know that was a lot pretty quickly, but I'm happy to talk about anything that you all think is the most relevant for Scio Township or maybe of personal interest if you work in the city. Brett and I are both here to answer questions. And if you have any questions from farther back than a couple years, then I'm going to point those to Brett.
Questions? Commissioner Hyde, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, thanks for the presentation. The only time you mentioned it was on the slide, well, it might be slide 15, but it's the potential future districts. You mentioned in low-rise residential that it's targeting lower scale housing. I assume that's size and not, but then you say missing middle. So that's for, to me, that's for the lower income, but not the lowest income. Is that true, first of all?
So this is not income based. Is that what I heard you say? Low
I
income?
did say that because of the term missing middle. I always think of that
Oh,
as not, you know,
yeah.
low income, and it's not, you know, the mansions, the McMansions, but
Right.
So-
Somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So the idea here, I mean, you are touching on part of the point is that we are trying to help lower the cost of housing where we can. And as planners, that's primarily through zoning. So missing middle, yes, these duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, we are hoping that if you could build 4 units, that it might be more financially attainable for residents, right? We often hear that people get priced out of Ann Arbor. We're in a housing crisis, very expensive. But it is not, they're still going to be primarily market rate in that sense that they're not going to be, we're trying to have homes cater to people with lower incomes, but they're not necessarily low income housing. Does that make sense?
it does. I think you've answered it by hedging. There's no way that you're going to put into your ordinances the requirements for affordable housing.
No, that'll be separate. And Brett, do you want to talk about that at all?
I would just echo Michelle's comments. When I'll tell you, I think of missing middle as a physical form of housing. For much of recent history, the predominant typology of housing built in Southeast Michigan was detached single family homes, and missing middle. We planners and you planners, sometimes we love to get caught up in a marketing pitch, and I think missing middle is trying to characterize sort of a more traditional evolution of communities. A lot of cities evolved over small scale courtyard apartments and duplexes and multiplexes integrated right into neighborhoods. And so, frankly, over history, a lot of communities such as Ann Arbor started segregating those uses or prohibiting them. And missing middle isn't so much about an income, it is about opening up the space for a different physical form of housing to be built that might be more suitable to somebody who doesn't want to care for a yard, but still wants ownership opportunities or rental opportunities. And you're right, we don't anticipate putting any income restrictions in the comp plan because, in fact, state law is pretty clear and prohibits communities from enacting zoning that would have that kind of impact.
Thank you.
Hi, Kathleen Rand. I just have a question on how your residents are, how are they accepting this? Are they warm to it? Are they, here in Scio, we have this semi-rural mentality.
Yeah, that's a good question. When we held those workshops that I mentioned in the spring and in the fall, a lot of those attendees, I think we've even quantified it's close to 3/4 of residents that attended were very pro housing and very pro a modest density increases. And now that we have been going around the city more, meeting with neighborhood associations, there are certainly people in single family neighborhoods that are not thrilled with this idea. And so that's our job, right? Is to listen to all ends of the spectrum and figure out how we can achieve our goals and help as many people as we can with this. But I would say the reception has generally been positive and accepting of this, but not by everyone.
I have more of a how this relates to infrastructure question because Scio has a contract for water and sewer with the city of Ann Arbor, and we have, you know, a certain volume contract. And
Mhm.
so when you're looking at, you know, increasing the density dramatically in areas and so forth, how does that fit in with the, you know, capacity for especially the sewer and that type of thing?
Well, that is a great question. We are working with our staff at the city who are consistently forecasting and thinking about development and how that aligns with what our actual capacity is. So we are in, if not weekly, at least monthly conversations with our staff about that. And the truth is that there are going to be some infrastructure constraints, that this future land use map is representative of kind of our ideal of what we would like. But the plans didn't align perfectly, right? So we're a little farther ahead than some of our asset managers who are currently working on what is our water capacity, what is our sanitary sewer capacity. And as those numbers become available of what their constraints are, we are definitely incorporating that in our plan and discussing as a staff, you know, where we might have to scale back on some of these. So we sort of started big with our vision and now are going to have to include some limitations into what is possible with our current infrastructure, but also thinking about like, well, if this is the density that we really want, what will it take for us to get the infrastructure we need to support that?
And
I would just,
go ahead.
I would just, yeah, I would just add that the contracts with Scio and other communities are absolutely incorporated into that. In fact, as part of those projections, the contracted amount might not be at that capacity right now, but we absolutely recognize that that potential for flow rate exists. So that's definitely part of our planning. But yeah, I mean, just to emphasize, there are definitely going to be issues, and that's part of our job is to be really transparent that this land use pattern recommends an outcome, and that's going to take a lot of steps, including infrastructure support and investment in order to achieve this in different areas of the city.
And then a follow-up question to that is also about the electrical capacity, because obviously the A20 plan is decarbonizing and electrifying, and how, you know, how are you incorporating, you know, DTE and the, you know, SEU kinds of things and maximizing, you know, renewables and generation in your planning?
So capacity, you might have noticed, and you might experience this, that electrical services is sort of a hot topic right now. It's being considered on multiple fronts, and I don't profess to be the most up to date on all of those, but you've seen conversations happening in the city. Of course, the creation of the city electrical utility that was enacted by the vote of the people. That will, I don't think people envision that at a scale that's going to, for a very long time, provide a significant amount of capacity for development in the city. Recently, there's been a lot of conversations about municipalization or analysis of potential municipalization. That was recently just had kind of a pivotal vote at the city council recently, choosing not to go forward with a phase 2 study in that regard. But as it relates to DTE, I can tell you that it comes up in a lot of contexts on projects across the city because we have a lot of incentive-based zoning requirements where if you fully electrify a building so that long-term the sort of carbon emissions of that building receives the benefit of the greening of the grid. We require documentation when people are seeking to take advantage of that. And so far the answer has always been from DTE that we have the capacity to service those buildings. It is sometimes not without a significant cost, but the answer is typically not, no, we can't power that. So I don't know when that'll happen, but so thus far, it's not a question of being able to shift towards fully electric buildings or more electrification. That definitely has a cost on development, which is something we're also sensitive to, but we haven't yet used it as a limiting factor any more than any other infrastructure. Again, I don't want to be naive. At some point, that will not hold true if we are successful to have more and more projects take a shift in that direction. But we haven't found those limitations yet. More of the frustration has just been about the reliability of that delivery. So, in short, no, I don't think it's been a limiting factor in us starting to stretch out what our vision might be. And it's within full stride with trying to move more buildings towards electrification to realize carbon reductions in the future.
Other questions?
I would make a comment.
Sure.
So looking at this map, it seems there's only a few places that Scio practically aligns or abuts, because we have 14 going through and we have I-94, which are hard barriers. Clearly, Jackson Road aligns in the eastern portion of Liberty Road. And I think we have similar goals in those areas. And other than that, I don't see that we have much collaborating.
There's a little bit on Miller.
And Miller, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, in completely practical terms, most of the time if I meet with like surrounding municipalities, it's just to make sure that along where we share a border, that we don't plan for conflicting uses. So when we get the draft, and this is totally up to date, I think it would be good for us to review again. But also, as neighbors, just wanted you all to know what we've been up to and what we're planning for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And one other comment, Suzanne Flowers is the official sort of stakeholder representative because we have a SEMCOG grant that we're looking at doing more complete streets sort of analysis of the Jackson Road corridor. So we're kind of looking forward to, looking at the connectivity and so forth. And that should probably, the framework that's going to come out of that it should happen probably by the end of June. So that'll be good timing to, look at the draft plan and some of what's coming out of that.
Yeah, that is great timing, and Suzanne's fantastic. So I'm glad you all get to work with her, and I do look forward to seeing what you all come up with.
Yeah. And we'll let you know when the survey's live, and hopefully as a resident, you can complete it.
That's right. That's right. I live right off Jackson, so I will be filling that out.
Oh, great. Anything else? All right, yes, go ahead, Commissioner Walsh.
Had a quick question. You noted that public sentiment previously was anti-development. Were there any other notable changes in public sentiment from previous studies?
I can't think of any.
I think housing affordability has become a broader constituency than maybe historically. Um, and I think that's probably drives some of the densification support that Michelle referenced. As planners, we have very, very limited opportunity to sort of put our thumb on the scale of development outcome. And um, I think that a wider segment of the population have now had more direct relationships or direct experience with um, housing limitations or housing scarcity than maybe was present even 10 or 20 plus years ago. And so I think that that's really elevated affordability as it relates to a lot of other land use policies. So I would say that's a pretty big shift.
In follow-up to that, were there any other strategies that you identified to increase or support that affordability? It seems like it's linked with densification. Are there other strategies that you were kind of exploring?
Yeah, the cities had a pretty long record of exploring some of the other things. We've invested our money in it. For decades, we've had an affordable housing fund that supports permanent, dedicated affordable units. Recently, the voters passed a millage to fund the similar investment in actual units. We have started looking over the last several years with some progress at publicly owned assets, largely, frankly, surface parking lots, and started looking at those as viable places for developing affordable housing. In the land use planning realm, I do think that I think that affordability is needed at all levels, and there's a cutoff somewhere um, that units at the lower end of income scale, I think, are most likely realized by public subsidy or investment. And then I think that there are some units above that level that our best planning method of encouraging them is getting out of the way and letting supply expand because we're not going to have the capacity to always monitor the full scale spectrum of different housing unit price points. And so I think that I think that the plan will represent that balance, continuing to find the ways that we can invest when appropriate, because plans relate to kind of infrastructure as well. And I think density is a method for us to find ways to just work on the supply side, because as we talked about before, we don't have the ability to say, hey, if you build X units, we want this percentage to be affordable. This currently state law doesn't allow us to do that. And I don't know, I'm definitely not an optimist when it comes to changing state law on a quick time frame.
Yeah, if you want to stay on, our next agenda item is public comment, and I don't know if there'll be any comments that pertain to the presentation, but you're welcome to stay on for that portion of the meeting. And you could, you can do the other stuff too, but that would be probably the only agenda item that might be of interest.
And when you say stay on, you don't necessarily mean they have to have their video on.
No. So I'm going to go ahead and open public comment at 7:39, and we do not have anyone in attendance, so we'll go right online to see if there is anyone with their hand raised.
Rob Pattinson.
All right. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Jen. My question is for Ann Arbor. Do they have the ability through the PUD process to work affordability into their agreements with developers? I understand it's not part of the zoning and the planning, but is there something in the PUD process that allows that? Thanks for allowing questions.
And Brett or Michelle, feel free to answer that.
Sure. Great question. Plan unit developments are not required. So it is a place that communities can identify. In the case of plan unit developments, it's identifying public benefits that might be provided in exchange for some flexibility of standard. We have incorporated that actually as sort of a price of admission into the PUD process. When you are asking for a plan unit development in the city, and you are proposing residential at a density above what would be allowed by right, you have to provide either a percentage of your units as committed affordable units, or we provide a payment in lieu option where you can contribute a corresponding amount to our affordable housing fund for us to invest in other forms. So absolutely, plan unit developments can be used in that form. It's just, it's not something that I feel comfortable under the state law just requiring. But yeah, plan unit developments provide a lot of flexibility to communities, and communities can define either directly or by criteria of how they might measure public benefits, and affordable housing could definitely be one of those.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Pam Boyd?
Hi, Pam.
Hi, thank you, Pam Boyd. A really awesome presentation. I really enjoyed it immensely, as it turns out. I think it was very concise. Actually, I love the presentation, but no questions. So thank you for thinking of us and coming out.
Thank you.
Michelle's pretty great.
Yeah, she's a Scio resident. Of course she's great. Anyone else?
No.
Move to close public comments.
Moved by Commissioner Hyde, supported
Second.
by, was that,
Secretary.
okay, Fletcher? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, public comment is closed at 7:42. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Have a good evening.
We'll be
Yes.
talking.
Yeah, thank you. All righty. Then, moving on to our approval of minutes.
I didn't see anything.
Anyone see any additions, corrections? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve as submitted.
I'll second. Commissioner.
Try not to fight.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved as drafted and posted. We have no public hearings this evening, so we're moving on to our unfinished business, which is the accessory solar discussion. I'll turn that over to Laura.
So at the meeting in January 27th, Doug Lawan presented to you the information regarding potentially modifying the accessory solar portion of the ordinance. As you know, we currently review accessory solar rooftop and ground mounted facilities as just as an accessory structure. So they are required to meet the required rear and side setbacks of the district that they're located in. And then recently we had a variance. We've only had 2 variances that I'm aware of seeking relief from setbacks for solar arrays, ground mounted solar arrays. one removed, able to remove themselves and, was able to modify the location to meet the standards. And then this last one, was denied. So we're bringing this back to you for consideration, and Doug provided some information regarding, as a follow-up to your conversation regarding substantial property rights. And I'll let you read through that yourself. I think the most important thing to discuss this evening is whether or not, this body is interested in providing a residential solar exemption, allowing for reduced setbacks for ground-mounted solar arrays, in residential zoning districts. And that would include the A1 district, the general agricultural, the R1, R2, R3, and R4 single-family residential districts. For your consideration, we wrote the following. Solar facilities shall not extend into the required front yard setback or corner side setback. That's currently how our ordinance reads. Solar structures may extend into the required side yard setback and rear yard setback by 50% of the required setback. Any solar structure that extends into the required setback, as noted above, shall not exceed 10 feet in height to help limit visual impacts of the encroachment. The solar structure shall be subject to lot coverage limitations, and the solar structure that encroach into the required side or rear yards shall be positioned to limit glare and reflection on any adjacent occupied. Yes.
Yeah.
I do have a question about that. Any solar structure that extends into the required setback cannot exceed 10 feet. Is that the structure that extends into it, and then there could be higher structure outside of that? I mean, see what I'm saying? Can it be tall and then get shorter as it goes in to the setback?
I would interpret this as the person that signs the permit is it cannot exceed 10 feet.
The whole thing?
The whole thing.
But if they were to keep it out of it, they could go higher.
They can go up to whatever the district allows. Typically, these are between 10 and 16 feet, sometimes 8. It depends on the topography. Those are the ones I've seen.
Yeah, and I did ask
Okay.
Homeland when you did the 2 stacking, like at the fire station, and they said those are typically 12.
Yeah.
So I would think that if we wanted to allow for the 2, we might want to say 12 feet rather than 10 feet. And then I would also say, because that would limit then people to possibly 1 panel, which is, would actually spread it out further for the amount of generation that you would get. Yeah. So a consideration there.
Sometimes triple stacked at 16 feet, I've not,
Yeah,
Yeah.
not too many
No.
residential ones would be.
ours is double, and I know it's not 16 feet high.
No.
I've been under it before, it's not 16 feet high.
And some of it is the type of mounting that they have too.
And whether it's fixed or
They'll move on.
tiltable, whatever. they
Yeah,
call
the tiltable ones tend to be taller. sometimes.
Right.
They tend to be, I think Homeland said about 20 feet,
Oh.
so, yeah. But those, if they're tilting, oftentimes because they have more generation capacity, you don't need as large as talking. More compact. So part of that is whether we, I guess, but whether we want to have an exception, and then I do like the percentage because we do have differing, rather than the deck always said 10
The
feet.
deck is
And I
10 feet.
thought that was kind of weird because you could have, varying setbacks, and the percentage seems to be more reasonable for a variety of residential.
And a deck is only allowed in the rear yard exception, and this would allow for a side yard exception.
So Jan, do you know
Yeah.
if these panels are standardized sizing in the industry? What I mean is length and width, and that drives your height.
Relatively,
If
yeah.
two
I think
stack.
relatively, yeah.
Okay.
And it's changing all the time, too.
Right.
I mean, as you know, they are smaller now than what they were 5 years ago, right? And so they're gonna be changing all the time. And I think Jan made a good point about the mounting. The type of mounting structure that's used will determine that height a lot of times.
I guess I have a concern about limiting the height of the whole
Right.
array if you encroach on a setback, as opposed to limiting the height that is encroaching in the
Right,
setback.
the encroachment.
Yeah. Because that would really limit
The
design of the
encroachment,
array.
Area that
Not-
covered.
not anything
right,
short of the encroachment.
right.
Because if they built up to the dotted line, they could be taller. So why not let them build, that's where I was going.
Yeah.
Build shorter going in close to the neighbors.
Has
I don't know
anybody
if they're-
seen them right on? You know, next to someone's house? I have not personally. Has anybody ever? I'm just curious, cause I'd like to go and drive by, and take a look.
Yeah, well, David Reed has a couple of them in the front of his
Mhm.
house.
But are they encroaching on?
No,
They're not.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
No, he has a very large one.
Okay, I'm totally curious. I'm not passing judgment one way or the other. I would
But I
like
think
to.
that-
The option,
Yeah,
it's giving the option for, because there are some, lots that are, where people are closer, et cetera.
Right.
Drain.
yeah.
And I think
Tree
it's,
by tree, I mean, a lot of it is
Canopy.
the canopy.
and I think it's, the idea is to try to be as clear as we can
Mhm.
to the developer or the public about what the expectations are, right? I mean, that's why we're getting so detailed about it.
Well, I think it's a valid point because I'm on a big lot. I could have put it anywhere. I've seen David Reed's. The lot that was rejected was a reasonable size. I'm trying to envision it in a smaller lot where there isn't a lot of depth and saying, all right, how is this going to go? And if we're giving people a 30-foot rear setback, we're giving them 15 feet. You've got someone else back there and you're putting this up. Visually, I'm trying to think of, are we actually now impinging on someone else's right as a neighbor?
Because you gotta remember too, the way that the panels are gonna be pointing towards the sun somehow.
Right.
So is somebody gonna be looking at the backside? I know it doesn't bother me on our property, but it's not the most attractive. I'm not saying I'm not trying to be, it's just something to think about is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree.
I think I said this at our last meeting that we want to make it allowable for as many people to
Mhm.
take advantage of the
Mhm.
technology. So then you get into the smaller lot sizes. That's where you have the problem, but
Right.
they may not have as much
And the
leeway.
The majority of smaller lots that I've reviewed, that I see, I review 50, I probably reviewed 100 last year.
Okay.
75% of them or more are roof mounted.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we still allow that. It's still an option.
So it could be on, if your house and your pitch faced in south.
Yeah.
You could be on the front of your house facing,
Yeah.
in theory, the road.
Yeah.
To get the southern
Yep.
sun, basically.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we don't, they're allowed by right. You have to get a zoning compliance permit, so you can go to the building department and get your building permit, but. So that's how the majority of smaller lots, and even, condominiumized developments. They're not gonna have they're not allowed to have an array, they're gonna have to have it on the. If that's.
I have a,
But maybe they'll want the windflowers.
yes, exactly. I have a question. How do you, I'm curious about that, to limit glare and reflection on any adjacent occupied dwellings. How do you determine that? I mean, what would they have to,
Ours, they don't.
I don't think
The-
they
the
don't
glass,
reflect.
the glass.
Yeah, because they're
I've
not
never
really
seen the glare
reflective.
coming off of ours before. The way they're angled, because ours don't move. So the way they're angled at the best place they can be with GPS location. But if you go up close to them, it's not clear like looking through a window. So
Right.
you don't get that kind of glare like you can get through a window.
Because I'm just wondering how you would
It's dark underneath them. That's how it sucks in
yeah.
the sun's energy.
how you would say that there wouldn't be any.
We would ask them to provide their manufacturer's information that tells us they don't have glare or reflection on the surface. That's how I would do it.
Okay, so it would just be a manufacturer.
It would be a manufactured note. And it's really to cover us, right? So when the neighbor says,
Right.
there's glare and there's this, and we can come back and say, well, we approved it and they demonstrated in their manufacturer's specs that it's
That they don't have
non-reflective and.
It's non-reflective.
Yeah, so.
That's
think
tough
about it-
because, yeah, when you go down the highway and you see the big arrays, I mean, they definitely are reflecting.
But isn't the glass
think
gonna
they
be
do?
designed to not have a lot of glare bouncing off because you want it to be sucking in the
Absorb.
sun's rays?
Right, it's gonna be absorbed, but still there's just, I don't know, it just feels like there's a,
Sometimes you get it right at the right angle or
just at the
something.
right angle, there's just some sort of a, you know. I'm just talking about large arrays though.
Like
Yeah.
at 14 and 23, there's that big huge DTE
Right.
set up there, and I personally have never had a glare come off that, but.
I haven't seen anything there, but I'm talking about like on 94 where there's
Miles of.
millions of them. Yeah, there's many, hundreds,
Yeah.
hundreds.
Well, AI says
photos.
that there's,
94,
they have an
they're facing
anti-reflective. Yeah. They have an anti-reflective. It's about 2% reflection.
It's about how much?
A 2%.
Of a reflection possible off them, so pretty low, it sounds like, okay.
Yeah, because that would be I mean, if it's near a highway or something like that, you could really cause issues. All right, I just wanted to make sure we had an idea of how you determine that.
Well, and Doug wrote this, so I'll talk to Doug about what he meant about the 10 feet, if that's what he intended, was that it to be within the.
Yeah, I think it
Exemption.
makes more sense that it would be within the.
That's probably what he meant.
And then whether or not we wanted to do 12 feet, or are we thinking that, no, it would just be a.
Well, they could
shorter-
still have 12 feet outside of the 10 feet,
Yeah,
Right.
but then they'd have to reduce it to 1 panel.
within their 10 feet, but they could go, I mean.
Some people might have to get creative like that to make
Well,
it work on
it's,
their property.
On the edge, instead of having panels.
Vertically, you'd
the
have to
next
do
one
them
could be
horizontally.
Horizontal.
Mm.
Mhm.
And stack them horizontally.
So I have a thought, so. The reason for keeping setbacks is, awareness of what neighbors see, right, or blocking. So
Like in your
is there anything we could think of, maybe I'm coming up with a new industry, that the backside of a solar panel could be masked, a mural, a painting of woods, so what the neighbor sees is not an ugly framework, ugly structure. Would be hard to write it in.
Yeah,
Well-
or you could just do a
Screening.
naturalized screening
Right,
of
Which
the
we
rear of
require.
the panel.
so
That's required now.
it is
No.
required.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think so.
It's not required now.
It isn't. Page 10 of the spec screening, wait. Sections VI says screening
Oh, in the proposed
around the
ordinance.
entire facility. Yeah, in the proposed, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I think that's in the large.
That's the large
large-
utility scale.
Large one,
That's
not
not,
the- yeah, this is the accessory use, because we've been treating them just like an accessory building, which we don't require to be screened.
well, then there's an application for it.
I suppose you could put, like, for example, wood fence panels to cover it if you wanted to do something like that. There, I know, I think it's Manchester now, they've got sheep and goats that graze under them to keep them clean, because our problem is we get weeds under them. So you gotta go under there and spray.
You need access.
Yeah.
You need access.
We need access, because otherwise
And they end
they
up,
just
they end up putting.
take over like weeds.
Trees and they don't get their solar anymore.
So thoughts on, I mean, it would have to be if it was the rear of it, because it'd be difficult to screen.
I mean, it's also gonna be difficult to enforce, right? Cause I can say, oh, you don't have whatever screening is required and they'll put it on there, but no one goes out and makes sure all of that's done.
You have an enforcement officer, right?
Yeah, we do. He's- But I mean, I don't know that I don't know what, I don't know. I think it's just extra stuff to make these people do. I don't know. And just so you know, the rear yards are either 50 feet or 35 feet, depending on what, single family residential you do. So you're talking either a 25-foot setback or a 17.5. Sides are 15 and 20 and 30. So in a side yard, it can be as close as 7.5 feet to your neighbor with a 10-foot structure.
I have a question for you. Isn't this covered, or did I just read this wrong, in section 36.48?
You're probably.
We're both confused.
Yeah, that's the big,
1AB.
We're making the same assumption that
Yep.
that applies to the accessory solar.
Oh, yeah, that's what you're
I did
saying.
that.
I'm sorry.
But I don't know why we couldn't have a screen. You say it's unenforceable.
I'm saying you could say, but also the whole point of putting in solar is you want it unobstructed. And so you start screening
In
it.
the south side, yes.
Right, but if you start screening,
That's really
saying you have to screen it from the neighbors, you have to put a fence up or evergreens or something, then you may reduce the impact you have on your
Yeah,
solar.
the neighbor to the south, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and how, I don't know, because ours don't have to be enclosed. Does anybody here have panels? And can you enclose the back of them? Is it gonna impede anything?
I mean, you need access to them for sure, so you
But
wouldn't
the
be able
panels
to-
doing their job, could that impede anything? I don't think ours particularly make noise, for example. The power line does, that's on the way east end of our property, that big huge thing buzzes the whole time. But I don't think our solar panels do. Is there any reason, right, if you need to have them serviced? You know, because a meteor falls out of the sky on top of your panels and they get destroyed, you need to have somebody out to fix them.
Some neighbors just don't wanna see these big, huge metal structures out their bedroom window, you know? And I don't blame them.
What little greenery they have.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing you could say is if it was within X feet of the property line, you need to provide, and I don't think I'd wanna, you don't need to say a fence or anything, I don't even think it needs to be, it could be deciduous, you know, it could just be, you know,
This is so against what you want though. you know,
well,
because
this would be the rear of it.
And you
Right.
It
wouldn't
still
need,
grows up and
It
then
could, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
over.
You wouldn't want a tree.
in the 15 feet, you could put up a 10-foot hedge that wouldn't shade the solar panels.
Does that hedge then count into the infringement or the
Right, it would
setback?
be in the
No,
setback
you can
area.
Landscape,
Whatever
however.
we want.
And then the neighbor could, at least it would be a kind gesture to, but you could only do it if was the rear of the solar within the setback, and then hopefully people would be a good neighbor and it. Sometimes you can't rely on the good neighbor rule.
Not if it costs.
I need to think further on the 50% rear and side based on the various zones. I'm not sure doing a blanket for all those zones is
Or you, I mean,
potentially
it
the
could
right way to
be,
go.
it could, well, a percentage. Oh, you're saying,
We may, depending on the zone and the setbacks in each
It
zone,
could be a-
be specific to that zone.
except then you'd have to change this ordinance every time you change to the setbacks and the other. I mean, you could do a percentage, or you could say a percentage, but not less than 20 feet. Or something like that, if
Yeah,
if you.
I'm just saying I need to think about that. That's
I think I need to visualize it, you know,
too.
make a drawing.
Well, you know what would be good is you could go over to the fire station
They started one.
and just tape off, 12 feet or tape off, or 17 feet, right? That's the closest so far.
17 feet to the rear, but 7.5 feet.
7.5 feet. So that's
to the
pretty close
side.
on the
That's
side.
really close, I
Yeah.
think, for a 10 or 12 foot structure. I think that's really close.
And I agree with that.
especially when you're, you're talking about,
Well, you're not gonna be able to fit a structure in.
well, in R2, 22,000 square feet. Approximately half an acre. You could be 7.5 feet from the side.
That's half of the setback.
Yeah.
Where's the 7.5 feet you're talking about? In your memo?
It's not
15 feet is that.
I'm in the schedule of regulations where it has all of the districts setbacks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that might be a little close.
I wonder, if let's just say we were to allow to have 10-foot like the decks. We're allowing for an accommodation we already allow for. So people already understand that you can have a deck within that 10 feet. Okay, maybe you can have a solar panel within those 10 feet. But, we could also just encourage roof mounted in those areas. I mean, that's what that's what really gonna work best in some of these districts, the smaller.
The smaller ones, the
Ones.
roof mounted.
And so I'm just concerned that in trying to make this exemption, we're trying to make it work for everyone when there are certain areas that roof mounted really.
It really
is the
is
only
the
option.
option.
As long
That's
as
a good
they're
point.
oriented right. The
Right.
roof slope has
Yeah.
to be.
Sure.
So.
Sure. But, we make an accommodation and then all of a sudden it's in.
Yeah, so you could do, I mean, you could do just the rear, or another option would be the side, not. And say it couldn't be less than, I mean, you could say 15 feet and that's the.
In R2 and R3, that's the setback.
Yeah, so you could, so
Well, but in R4, it's 10
10
feet
feet.
side.
Yeah, so then. Oh,
They're
so then
probably
you'd be
left out.
more restricted than the side setback.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there might be a wording where you could allow for some flexibility, but not, where it's,
Less than a certain.
yeah, less than a certain amount.
I really think, if you're allowing for some flexibility in the rear, this is just my opinion. I don't necessarily think you have to allow for it on the side. That's just.
And you just have more flexibility because you have rear to rear, you have larger setbacks anyway, so that gives you a little more distance to
The only
place.
reason why you would is because of the orientation of the lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you may for the rear, but it's not the orientation. It
And
doesn't.
that's when they would come for the variance, right? We're not, I think part of the conversation was, we're changing, usually when you're changing an ordinance because of a variance, it's because you've had numerous variances for the same thing. Well, we're not seeing that here. Right.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I can see that. So if you did the rear and
Not the side.
not the sides, and then I think the acknowledgement of it being a substantial property right is helpful because that gives that says the ZBA can, there isn't any going back and forth. It is
a property
a
right.
property right. And then,
Well, do you need to say that in the language? Since you're already allowing it under the statute or in the ordinance.
It gives the ZBA coverage to say that you're denying someone something that someone else in their district has.
It is, in addition to that, they also still have to provide that there are unique circumstances associated with their property. They can't just say it's a substantial property right, where, there are other criteria that it has to meet to get a
Yes.
variance.
but it does give it that,
Yes.
you don't have to debate that.
It's
within the
it's not
ZBA.
questioned.
Another reason why side setbacks should be included, as a reduction is because buildings are closer to the side lot line, and they're going to be a lot taller than the ground mounted arrays, and they're going to shade them much more
So
readily.
the practicality of it is
It's not gonna
less.
come up that much.
That's a good point. Okay.
It's twice a little more than 6 years.
Yeah.
Not gonna come up that much.
But yes, I think, but it does a couple
But
things.
we're ahead of things, I think how it was brought up before. I mean, I think it will come up more frequently and we might as well get ahead of it instead of being behind it.
And it also gives, it's more direction to the solar installers. So hopefully they're paying attention to this other than before coming and with their permit.
All right, well, I have some notes, so I guess, we'll bring this back. We'll talk about it again. Doug also had two other points in this memo. He talked about residential wind exemption. He states that generally speaking, an exemption for the location of a wind tower is not needed due to the overall fall zone setback for the tower itself. So if we start allowing it further closer to setbacks, then we look at potential problems with the fall zone of those types of towers.
Not funny, but right.
Yeah.
I had to visualize.
And then the fourth point was removal requirements and that these may become blight. And this is covered under the blight ordinance. And so we can send out our code enforcement officer under that section blight. So we wouldn't need any specific removal
So
requirements.
with the width things, what's the height restriction?
70 feet.
Very tall. Those flowers that Laura sent me aren't that tall, are they?
No.
No, they're much more reasonable.
Well,
In
they
height
don't catch the
appearance.
high winds, I mean,
I mean,
high level.
you can do them, you can put up, there's some roof mounted, there's some that are taller, you know, that are more commercial like, but.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what those, because we just did the only wind that we have in, that we're benchmarking is the Unitarian Church. And that only generates like 1,500 kilowatt hours a year on average.
What
So
is
it's pretty
Skylines?
small. They used to have that online and it's not anymore. I've
Do
heard
they
that
have
it's minimal. What's that?
Skyline has.
Skyline has-
Yeah, they just have the, yeah.
One tower, one
the-
turbine,
On top of the school building?
one turbine.
Yeah, and I don't think they're tracking it anymore.
But there's something about those flowers that apparently the way they were engineered that they, you know,
They actually create something
They-
between.
yes,
them.
and they really, the engineering of them is better, or whatever. It takes less wind to get them going. You know, if you watch some of the videos and stuff, if you go through that, it's quite amazing, really.
Yeah, those were
Because I
cool.
think one can help its friends move then when they
Correct.
get moving a little bit and they're not 50 feet tall or
Right.
50 feet tall and they're more aesthetically pleasing, I think.
I
Look at
agree.
them.
They are, they're beautiful.
Hopefully I can.
All right. Then. I think we're on to reports. Laura, you did the report to the,
I did the report.
any
Um,
updates to that?
Well, you'll get another one this week because I do them the week of our planning commission meeting. We did have a pre-development meeting or, I'm sorry, concept meeting. With Bob was there last week with Victory
Right.
Auto Group. They would like to, the prior Tri-Stone office development at 30 Parkland Plaza. I don't know if you remember that, it was a Dave Hughes project. Probably 8 or 10 years ago, was never completed. One building was completed.
Where do
And
they want to go? Where is that?
30 Parkland Plaza, there's one office building there now. They would like to add another office building and then covered parking for high-end vehicles for the CEO. This is gonna be their headquarters. So that's gonna be coming.
Interesting.
Private parking.
Private parking for their expensive cars they drive. That one, we don't have anything ready for next meeting. I have no projects. I'm gonna check with Fran tomorrow, but it's likely that meeting will be canceled and then you have your training session on the 31st.
Oh, great.
Did you have the Uh-oh. The quality 16 already reported on it.
No, we have our staff meeting next week.
So then after that, you'll talk.
After that, I can talk about it.
Okay.
Our reports aren't done yet. My report isn't done
Okay.
yet. It's unlikely that's even close to coming here. It'll probably, I'll have to go back to fix things and
Back to the
resubmit.
drawing board.
I don't know about totally back to drawing, but they'll have to resubmit, I'm pretty sure, to have a full, submittal.
What are we talking about?
The theater.
Oh,
The old theater.
Okay. Those are the big ones right now.
do we have any, I'm just curious about the affordable units
Which one?
for Goodrich.
I haven't, not there yet. I thought nothing.
They didn't have a write-up on those drawings.
They didn't.
No.
And it's my understanding that they intend to seek TIF, housing TIF, potential brownfield TIF. I think that's in play, but I don't know that I have not had any conversation about, besides from our, conceptual meetings before they submitted what that might be, but I don't know.
The drawings are in the entrance to Township Hall.
Mhm.
So I pulled them out before the concept meeting for the other thing and just looked through them, but there was no write-up on it. The only,
You have to kind of know what you're looking at to understand.
I didn't see any mention of affordability. They didn't mention that.
Well, yeah, that probably would be, but
What?
no, I don't,
1
Yeah.
and 2 and 3 bedrooms.
about 200.
Well, that's
In two
smaller than,
buildings.
Oh, it was 220 before.
It might be, that it's around 200 units. I don't know the exact. Anyway.
all right, any other questions for Laura? PC chair report, the Jackson Road corridor survey will go live sometime this month. It's kind of on the website, but it isn't the survey yet, and there'll be some additional information that people can look at too. And Wendy Ramson, who's going to be doing getting the development you want, was wondering if we have any issues in particular we'd like her to highlight. Thoughts on, I was thinking about, we're always discussing about how do you maintain the rural character of the more rural parts of the township, and I think another one was placemaking and connectivity, possibly meeting carbon neutrality goals, any other kind of topics that might, she wants to make it more tailored to.
And this is the person that's doing the.
Yeah, and Wendy was actually, she worked for the Ann Arbor Planning Department for a really very long time. Yeah, so she's very familiar with the area.
Any ideas about creating nodes?
Draws people to nodes. Central parking so you can get to all the different businesses that might be in the area. I don't know how outsiders think any walkability aspects to these. I don't know. I wasn't sure if we were going to try to do that. It's not like we're gonna have parks in here, public parks and reserves, because already we've turned one down that was offered to the township. And that was in auto.
Although
Um,
people's ideas of whether a park is needed along Jackson Road is, I've
variable.
heard different.
Right.
I guess the uniqueness about the nodes is,
Uh-huh.
how do we create it for local residents, recognizing that there are also interstate exits that are going to draw some transient traffic from people just passing
Right.
through.
If they have a place to stop.
Yeah, but are we emphasizing one over the other, or recognizing that any business that goes there is probably going to want both?
Well, that's
Both
what
traffic, both kinds of traffic.
Both kinds of traffic.
That's what the nodes.
Just assume that, I guess maybe I'm just too simple in my thinking. I
Maybe
just
as a-
assumed
a-
that we
a-
would, that like any cafes or any what other businesses that would go along the corridor in these nodes, they would want to get the 94 traffic as well as the community traffic.
Which really brings up the whole issue of drive-throughs.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
and that's,
Um,
but as we go to carbon neutrality and charging stations and everything else, it's not necessarily a drive-through, it's a little more upscale than that. If you're gonna be parking as you're driving through 94 and you need a place to stop and charge for 30 or 45 minutes.
Take a break and eat.
Right. But again, it's,
You know,
I
when we
don't have
were,
a graph to get.
It's
Uh-huh.
really a 15-minute charge or less.
You can do your,
I mean, we literally, there were times that I couldn't even get to the bathroom and back before my car was charged on a
From
long,
zero?
on a long range, yeah, but from a
because
long,
they're changing the, yeah.
on a long range trip. I mean,
Don't have any.
and that was
experience
with the level 3 charging station? or-
they were two different sizes that we ended up utilizing. And I couldn't get to the bathroom and back before it was sending us a message saying, you're ready to go.
Wow.
Wow.
And it's not that long of a walk into the restroom.
But yeah, the drive-through thing. The good one.
Yeah, you know, I just remind folks, this drive-through issue came up before with the old
Panera.
Panera location on Jackson, and I think one of our residents made a good point about some of our what was it? Some of our disabled or
Oh, yeah, the whole idea of that sort of convenience for people who have mobility issues.
Like better sidewalks.
No, this was the drive-through convenience.
That
in favor, they were in favor
Relate
of
to
the
that.
drive-throughs.
drive-throughs for people that are,
But there's alternatives, like you pull up and you're serviced at your car instead of driving through your park.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
good point.
accommodation.
It still gets back to some sort of discussion on nodal development. What do we want in nodes and what are the pros and cons of different types of businesses?
Yeah, and then I think also maybe the streamlining of the zoning, because I thought that was a really, I mean, for Ann Arbor to come from, how many zoning districts they have? Yeah,
30 plus to 4.
uh-huh.
Be nice to have that here, but.
Well, if they get to 10, that's great.
Yeah, so that might be another,
Thing we work on.
or just get her, thoughts on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I keep thinking of Parkland Plaza, and that's probably the most mixed use in a way of any
Yeah.
area that Scio has, other than the planned, what is it, the apartments and offices on Z. I mean, that was sort of the and where
Oh,
OHM's offices. basically.
Scio Town Center.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Yes.
Which was planned that way,
Yes.
but Parkland Plaza was just sort of.
It was zoned that
sort of
way, this office.
Evolved and, yeah,
Office industrial and then plus the housing and, you know,
yeah, it just doesn't have any food.
no, it's not.
Okay, anything else? Cause I'm gonna kind of email these things to Wendy. Okay, and that is gonna be 5 o'clock on the 31st. We're gonna run our own Zoom and so forth for that meeting. And yeah, I think you're gonna be remote, right? Is everybody out? Can everyone else make it here?
At 5? Yes.
Okay, great. And Laura will watch the recording.
Yeah, I'm not gonna come, but I'll watch the recording, so I hear what happened.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to say is just ESTF, we did get a composting proposal that we thought was rather outrageous with the services that the entity was providing to facilitate. So we're going to explore doing it kind of directly and maybe look at, because it's for two composting carts, service once a week. It's $240 a month, which isn't, I mean,
More than my trash.
yeah, it is.
And recycle.
But they wanted another 5,000 a month to
For the-
facilitate
For management of the
of
project.
the project, and we sort of said, I don't think so. So we're trying to work on a strategy that because My Green Michigan, is it My Green Michigan? The hauler
I think
has a lot of information about what could be. So part of that is having a discussion with the trustees and so forth, is if we had the composting here, how much there were some issues with people dumping stuff with the recycling dumpsters, but these are, you know, covered more of a cart type thing. So the question is whether we think we could monitor it adequately. If we use this
Yeah, monitor.
as a composting site.
So did you folks, investigate, instead of having a bin that gets hauled away, that the composting is in a land space and it stays there?
That's what we would prefer. but
Okay, so.
Then we'd have to take on the management and the processing all ourselves.
Right, and you,
We
and
weren't
this
Thinking we were ready for.
processing also does the BPI materials, so it could be you know, plateware, all of those composting things, so the township hall could go to, you know, having a composting possibility for food waste and all the other BPI things. And you can have, the advantage of that is you can have a composting bag that you just take and you put in there rather than having all the loose
Scraps.
scraps.
We originally, Kathleen, were thinking of setting up a township-based location where people would bring their composting material and it would be directly put into the ground and turned and monitored and all that. But who's gonna do it right now? We didn't have anybody doing it and we would have to start that from scratch. Or, hey, look, there's another township doing this way where it's processed remotely, but it's picked up and taken there and it would get us started along that line. And so this would be a first step, not the end.
What about what they're doing down at the farm on Zeeb and Scio Church? And they're, you know, why not
The hill-
incorporate it within that?
Oh,
Well,
Yeah.
is that?
And some people
Apron.
are concerned about food waste going into things like that. They want
It's gonna
They want
attract
more
animals.
leaf, they want
but-
more leaf matter and that type of thing and not the food waste.
That's
because
again,
of
the management
Right. You're
situation.
doing a
with the-
different process than taking
He
household
doesn't take
waste.
that. That's Richard. I ride on his land.
So it's a different one, but
No.
yes, we
I know,
wanted
but I
somebody.
mean,
to-
we have that land. That's Scio Township's land. That's not his land.
But we are.
But he's not
dictating-
taking food waste though.
But I'm saying that's something that Scio, since Scio owns that land, that's something that
we
Scio
could
could,
require.
yeah.
Ask.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not his land.
Well, the other one we were
And that
investigating
makes
was
more sense.
Project
than putting it
Grow
at the
to
Scio
do that.
Township
Right.
parking lot. That makes more
I
sense.
mean, he's got
to-
that whole business down there that was just handed to him.
We can ask for a
Why,
little
what's
corner.
what's
somewhere.
that? Don't you feel that way?
Don't I feel that we should be able to influence on Scio Township's land, how it's used? Yes.
Thank you. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
Well
Uh,
said.
Well, I was just repeating what Laura was saying.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Do I know that we could take,
That's good
and
feedback.
somebody who's already set up to do something?
I'm not saying
They could
him, maybe
change.
someone else.
Yeah, because we did start with looking at doing something like that and they
Yeah.
tried to work with Project
Project
Grow at Vestagards
Investigate,
to,
have the area and
and-
want it.
and They're,
I don't think he has the area, cause he's utilizing all of his
And
area.
in his area, when you didn't have an access point where trucks could come in bringing material that were collected elsewhere, it
Right.
would churn up the
Right,
mud. So no, we couldn't do it.
but that does.
Yep.
and then,
You know, we don't,
go ahead.
we don't own that land.
It was put into
conservation
conservation.
But we would
Oh,
own
we
it.
don't
Scio.
own
We don't
Okay,
own it.
sorry, you
I
know.
think it can
I see
only
what
be
you're
a
saying.
farm,
Yeah.
it can't be subdivided, but I thought that Richard and his family's trust bought it. That's what his mother came and told, he
Yeah,
and his
I'm-
mother came and told my mother and I.
You're looking at the map, yeah.
So
it
it's
is
in a
township
conservative.
plan.
It's under conservation, but
preserved
it's owned
farm.
by, but it's owned by them.
Okay,
Yes, right, so we don't
Okay.
have that.
I thought that they
Completely.
completely
Bought it.
turned it over. Yeah, cause I thought Scio gave them,
Well, we were thinking of doing something like this
Well, we did
originally
give 'em
at,
some.
at West,
Give them the land.
West Preserve.
West Scio.
West Scio Preserve, which we do own.
Where's that?
That's on Liberty and almost to Parker.
Okay,
And,
that old farm out there?
right, but it's kind of remote and people
Uh-huh.
would have to bring their stuff there. And so we thought and they could use improved soils there because they were stripped. So, you know, there'd be a ready application of the
Yeah.
material once we made it into
Liberty
compost.
Farm. It is.
However,
that-
we'd have to
it's
take it on
Liberty.
ourselves.
Very nice.
So
Yeah,
it's,
it's the whole issue of having someone that is going to actively managing it, and that has
rather
a
than
cost too.
having the township manage it.
right,
But good discussion, and we'll continue to.
and maybe there's some other area.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Can I
yeah,
ask
go
a
ahead,
little bitty question?
you can have.
Okay, the land that Vestergaard uses, is that leased or is that was sold?
Leased.
It was
No,
sold.
sold.
Wait, he
He,
leases the land up by us. He pays
On Li- on-
500 on Wagner, he
on
pays
Wagner.
$500 a
just
year.
the fire station portion, which
Yes.
is leased to him.
From the fire station to,
Just the fire station portion of the
Yes.
land that Scio owns.
Okay.
He owns the rest of it.
Okay.
He owns, and we sold that to him,
Isn't that a preserved farm?
because we owned that, we sold that to him.
Well, right,
Under the buy protect.
buy,
sale.
protect, sell.
There was a process that they went through, yeah. And which brings up a couple things, just in this conversation
the
we
fire
had.
department goes.
That's
Yeah,
what I was thinking.
yeah,
If we could.
if we could.
Somebody has to
Instead
run
of
it, we
spending that
hire,
money,
you know, the township
Oh,
hires
when
someone.
we hire the
the chief might have a
the
problem.
contractor
Whatever,
to
he
do
can
the
get over
building
it.
plans,
Good luck.
the site development plans for the fire
Way
station,
in the back.
we add another component to the requirement.
Well, that's what the land is intended for. Fire station is in front.
Water
Wagner.
storage,
And there's land in the back that could be, water tower.
right. Well, water storage was
Water
gonna be,
storage underground.
yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
gonna be a town.
Okay.
But it was also, I mean, there's other parts
I
of that
mean,
land
yeah,
that
that
weren't
parcel is
spoken for, so maybe there's a way
And
to.
it's way
To-
back, I mean.
and
it's
then
whole
here
back area.
with
I mean, the fire departments.
I think it's 9.5 acres.
Yeah, they're gonna be.
The other thing, Laura, and this is, it just came up in the, we had, the Hungary Local Board person talk a little bit about his relationship with different farms, and which inspired me to do a map. I'm gonna work on a map that lists all the farms
Nice.
that are producing things that are close in Scio, and then some that are close.
Did Norm Roller?
Yeah, yeah. And then in the conversation, they mentioned White Lotus was purchasing a place for the retail
Yeah.
somewhere on Jackson Road, and then,
No, it's on
Liberty.
the old Mancino.
Yeah, the old man scene.
oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Oh,
Going in on scene.
what happened to that?
That will be really neat.
They're gonna open shortly,
To retire,
right?
Oh,
Laura, when are they opening? Like in a month?
I have no idea I have their zoning compliance, and then they will get their building permit. So they'll get their zoning compliance probably tomorrow.
woohoo, that'll be fun.
It's gonna be good.
And then the other one is.
I like that idea. That's what I'm talking.
Yeah, and they didn't even have to come through the planning commission. Because of the Scioto Town Center thing, right?
Mixed use.
Mixed use. Woo-hoo. And then,
Where they're
and
parking
this
a-
one,
That's a little slippery
is-
parking.
there was some discussion about Vestergaard and the development of the property, you know, that's on Wagner in Scio, and wanting to do more of a food hub there.
I've talked to him about that.
Okay,
Where at?
But that's been, I mean, probably a year ago.
So do you mean like what
It's a
they've
lot.
got in, I think it's Lodi Township, or a stand?
I
that
think he has a
sells?
long-term goal to do educational things out there and some food hub things, but it's a long, I mean, we've talked about it. You know, it's a financing, it's a long-term goal.
And where on Wagner?
Where the property next to.
where he
fire
pulled,
station.
tore down the house that was there.
Mhm. That old white farmhouse.
So the new fire station and then it's all that
South of
land.
Liberty,
They
north
live
and
in
south.
towns and
I know,
they're on
south of
Fourth, which is kind of weird.
Just
Yeah,
across from
Yes. From
the,
ISD kind of, yeah,
right across there.
yeah, which also would be a really
Around
good
town, well, the county-
support for the local.
Yeah.
Okay, that was mine.
What's your report?
Board of Trustees.
Yes, at the last meeting, Vinnie Hans came, it was, tabled until tomorrow's, meeting, so they're coming back. The board has done a lot of work with the department heads on the budget, and we expect to approve the budget tomorrow. I asked some questions about your department that I was like, well, what about this? And they said, oh, that's there for a reason. I said, okay. I was looking for money, you know.
Can I ask you, did a planning commission budget get whacked,
No,
lowered?
no,
Okay.
no, because there's an anticipation of savings or more revenue through a different processing, right?
Yeah.
Laura's taking a pay cut?
And escrow.
But an escrow-based system for developer applications instead of this flat rate fee that we currently use. And that will generate, that will essentially cover the development costs, which aren't being covered.
Right.
Which the whole purpose of doing those fees is to cover
Is to
the
cover
development.
Right, yes,
Good job.
which is gonna take some time and, you know, on an operational side of the township, figuring out how that's gonna work and who's gonna do that, but yes, it's entirely possible.
Anything else? ZBA?
We covered the February ZBA at the February 24th meeting, and the second scheduled for March.
Nope. And as of now, I don't have any applications for you.
And were you gonna, I think you were gonna just spy on the DDA?
Oh, did I do that, didn't I? I have not spied yet. I'll get on that.
Nothing like declaring a public meeting that.
I think dual recordings, if you stare at it.
Yeah, I did. A little late, but I did. Okay, and we don't have anyone on RAC. LPC meets this Thursday.
There's an agenda item on the board, tomorrow
Oh, yeah.
for a purchase.
Cool.
It's an
And,
easement purchase.
EPP, anything there?
Nothing new.
And you did Huron River Watershed, any questions there?
Any questions? Trying to encourage people to click on, you know, anybody in the public that looks at what's in our packet can also pull that up and click, and it'll get them into the Watershed Council's website, and then maybe they'll poke around.
Some stuff.
Yeah. Stuff I'm not talking about yet.
And Western Washtenaw,
We canceled our meeting in February because weather got slippery and all that, so we're rescheduled to March 12th, if it is. That's where the update of the March 12th,
Wednesday.
yes. That's the Washtenaw County update. So folks like to see what's going on with the updates, and that's at 7 o'clock at the Chelsea, on Main Street at the Chelsea Council Room.
okay. Any other announcements? I just want a couple reminders. If you're interested, the U of M is going to be the webinar tomorrow. At noontime, the U of M is going to roll out their sort of utilities plan with their geo and solar and so forth. And that is, you can register for that on the 2030 district. It's free website, but you can, because you need a Zoom link to go in. And then the 25th is the agri-solar one that I think I sent out to everyone. Because I think that one will definitely be interesting as we look at the next tier of the solar ordinance. Because we can go ahead with the accessory one and just roll that one out, and then
We're in a holding pattern with the other.
with the other one because of all the lawsuits and stuff. Right.
Second public.
Second public comment. I'll open public comment at 8:40. Rob Jorgensen. Hey, Rob.
Hi again. Two things were very interesting about that planning presentation from Ann Arbor. Thank you very much for having them out to do that. That Ann Arbor is using their planning commission for doing planning that some of you on this board, yes, Commissioner Moore, I'm looking at you, have been calling for years and years and years.
Oh, for planning, yeah.
To get us more geared towards planning rather than reacting to submissions. So that's wonderful news, and that you are indeed going in that direction is wonderful. But his response to the PUD question, that he used the words, it's the price of admission for an Ann Arbor PUD to have affordable housing. I think Scio Township could do very well going along the same lines, is that there are certain items that are the price of admission. If you want to do a PUD in Scio Township, there is a price of admission. Jan, could you send the link to Brandon for the U of M utilities thing tomorrow? That might be very interesting for him. And then REUs. A few months ago, a couple of months ago, you were talking about REUs, and are REUs limited by the contract, or are REUs limited by the diameter of the 12-inch sewer main? And OHM was going to look into that. Did you ever hear back from them about what the limitation was on REUs?
It's the contract.
Is the contract.
And there are some infrastructure improvements too, but
To work
it's,
out,
yeah.
They're working on them.
Yes.
Did you hear that, Rob?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And that is it. Great meeting. Thank you for the in-depth conversations. Appreciated that. Well done. And I'm very glad that this break in applications is giving you a chance to really start delving into the planning aspect. Well done.
Can I make a comment about Rob's comment?
Sure.
He caveated that
That
price
sure
of
is.
admission. I mean, he said it's the price of admissions, and then he backed off and he talked about the state law. And you gotta stay within it, and you can encourage, I mean, he used some
Yeah, he
less
gives
strong
qualifiers
word.
In there. And I think the other comment that I would make too is there are two avenues that they have in their PUD. One is that to provide the units, the other one is the payment. And Ann Arbor has a way of producing with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, their own affordable housing.
Right.
So, and there has
Subsidize the
been,
affordability?
well, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission
Yeah.
actually builds
Gotcha.
builds the projects. Now, and this is, my understanding is in the last so many years, one, there've been very few PUDs. And
Right.
two, only one developer has actually provided the units.
Right.
All those funds have gone into their fund,
They
their housing
paid
fund.
for it rather
They
than.
gave it.
built.
providing it. And so
That's
you're,
what I had heard, that's a deterrent for PUDs.
yeah, so yeah, and
Poison pill.
we do need to do some, work on housing, because I think what is accurate is what he said is the true affordable, the under market housing ends up being an investment by the community. And whether it's providing the land. The other thing, I don't know if you guys have looked at there's a nonprofit called EA2. And they just listed
Oh, I did see
two
that
houses. They're,
on Wagner
yeah,
and a couple in Water Hill.
yeah, that they're gonna be building and they're, so as a nonprofit, they take on some of the expense of getting them to a certain point so they can offer them. So these are homes for $125,000, basically. I think it was a duplex.
Yep.
25,000. So that's another avenue. I don't know if their mission is beyond the physical boundary of Ann Arbor, but it could be, an interesting thing. Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else? Any other hands raised?
Rob raised his hand again. Again? Hey, Rob. Hey, Rob.
Thank you. Just one clarification. He didn't so much back off the price of admission statement for the PUDs. What I heard him say was that the state regulations didn't allow them to require it in their zoning, and that their only path to using it as a price of admission was through the PUD process, and that gave Ann Arbor some bargaining room to
Yeah, that's what Jan said. You can also buy your way out of that.
Yeah, and that was fascinating, Jan. Thank you for that. That there only one has actually taken them up on that. That's very interesting and very telling.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anyone? Good. Okay, then I'll close.
Move to close
Comment.
public comment?
Okay, that was, Fletcher was seconding, Moore was, moving.
Moving.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Public comment is closed at 8:46.
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Hyde,
I'll second
support from Commissioner Hindle. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 8:46.